Hello, everybody. Good evening. This webinar today evening was a wonderful success. I'm saying was a wonderful success because I'm re-recording the initial 20 minutes section of this entire webinar because due to my absence of mind, I missed to record the early 20 minutes. And I believe that the entire webinar that you must have witnessed and participated will be of great use for you after seeing this recording again and again. So let's start welcoming all and focus on the first screen of what you are seeing right now. I believe this topic of ours today, dealing with emotional health and well-being of children, is of immense importance from the perspective of the caregivers and school teachers like you. And I believe this entire webinar will be of great usage for you. So let me introduce me and my colleague, Dr. Ruta Savarkar, who happens to be a pediatrician and a child psychology expert who deals with holistic healthcare in children and in adults. I am a clinical psychologist and I am a homeopathic physician as well. So we together started this entire Brainberg to uplift the people from their challenges, from their unease to ease in the year 2009. Today's topic will be dealing with emotional health, and I'll be focusing on emotional intelligence, and my colleague will be focusing on well-being in children. And then we'll start, introduce some techniques and methods for you to go along with dealing with things. So, the next slide here, you'll see the components of emotional intelligence. So what is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is your ability to deal with your own emotions and thoughts, and also of the emotions and thoughts of others, how you relate to others. In a complete sense, the World Health Organization defines health as a state of complete physical, emotional, and social well-being, and not just a state of absence of disease or infirmity. You must focus on this part. It is not just an absence of disease or infirmity, but it is actually a complete sense of well-being. You may not have disease, but you may not experience well-being, and that is not a complete state of health. So what are the components here? We are going to try and understand one of the important components of this well-being, and that is emotional intelligence. There are 5 basic understanding of emotional intelligence as given by one of the early proponents of emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman. He, in his theory of emotional intelligence, puts forth the 5 components which are basics, and then later they got expanded into various subparts. But to focus on certain things, we must understand it is self-awareness, self-motivation, self-regulation, empathy, and managing relations. Self-awareness is knowing your own emotions and thoughts. Self-motivation is the inspiration that drives you from within. Self-regulation is managing these thoughts and emotions. While empathy is of 3 types, it's like, connecting, understanding the other person's emotions, understanding the other person's thoughts, and also the third and most important part is connecting to these emotions and thoughts, and that is, the empathetic connect that we can call it. All this can be used for your managing relations, and which forms the 5th and most important aspect of emotional intelligence. When you've understood this, you see on your screen a figure, a diagram of a brain which highlights 2 areas. One is amygdala and other is prefrontal cortex. Now, let us understand what these areas are so that it is easy for you to deal with these things. What is amygdala? Amygdala is one of the very primitive areas of your midbrain. What is midbrain? Midbrain is the middle section of your brain which harbors limbic system, which is the seat of emotional brain. And here is where all your emotions are neurochemically generated, apart from the seat of, you cannot directly call this a seat of mind, but you can definitely have a neuroscientific connect of your seat of emotions here in the midbrain. Amygdala is one of the part of it, and it is, as I said, a primitive thing in the prehistoric day of humans. This used to be one of the alarming system where humans used to go for hunting, and they used to find that something is threatening them. Something life and death situation occurs. Amygdala used to be alerted, and it used to give freeze, flight, or fight response. This classic response is given by amygdala, and under the seat of emotion or the heat of emotion, the response that human exhibited were either of these three reactions, which were not thoughtful. Now, what happens with this? Under the immense burden of emotions, we may not act rationally. The responsibility of acting rationally falls with the second area that is highlighted on your screen, and that is prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex is actually one of the sophisticated areas which deals with handling of crisis in terms of taking decisions, making observations, calculating things, analyzing things, and also one of the most highly developed areas of rational thinking. Under the normal circumstances, information goes through prefrontal cortex and a thoughtful response comes up. But when amygdala hijacks all the information, normally an emotional response sets up. Critical thing here to understand is not all things that amygdala perceives as threat are life and death situations. Things like unappreciation, things like you put into you feeling that you're isolated, things that people humiliating you, things that you're not paid enough attention for, things that you are criticized for are also taken as threats by amygdala. And in that situation, the emotions that come up are either anger, frustration, pain, guilt. All these things cloud your rational thinking, and the response that comes up is typically under the influence of emotions. Why I'm telling you this is there is three things that we must understand while managing the emotions of the children, or maybe for that matter anybody. This is one thing. If you understand this, let us hop on to the next thing, and that is brain activity and performance. When under the influence of emotions, it is not only the brain or nervous system that responds, it is also the hormonal system that comes into play. And normally in a fear, flight and freeze type of mechanism, there is cortisol, a hormone that is secreted from your adrenal gland that comes into the bloodstream. And this is important to understand from the perspective that cortisol levels manage your stress. They optimize the way you respond to stress, or maybe it is one of the best indicators to perform optimally, to able to cope with the situation. But anything goes beyond the control of your normal stress, which is required for you to function, and that goes into some kind of distress. Cortisol levels goes up and you land up into a distress, and that is normally we call this as stress. Or when you have nothing challenging coming up with you, you may land up into boredom where the cortisol levels are low. In either of the situation, the performance is low. There is no performance coming out of the person, in this case children. So to perform optimally, you must have an optimal level of cortisol, which also is decided by what kind of emotions that you feel in your entire being. If you understood this, there is third thing if you ponder upon, and that is the neuronal circuitry. Most of you must have known that our brain harbors billions of neurons. This is basic unit of our nervous system. Neurons connect with each other through synaptic junctions. These synaptic junctions are responsible to carry on information from one synapse to other synapse, primarily through chemical gateways. These are called synapses. Greater the number of synapses, greater the pathways, and greater the responses that the brain utilizes and makes you an intelligent being. What is important here is you must understand the synaptic junctions, or synapses for that matter, or pathways, neural pathways, are constantly in a heightened fashion of like a wiring and rewiring in initial days of the child. Like from birth until 5 years, it is very high. It is also optimally high in the later 5 to 12 years. But as the child grows into adulthood, this rewiring and rewiring gradually comes down. This is directly related to your learning mechanisms. How you learn. Pathways are essentially one of the important aspects that learning is hardwired in your brain. So you must understand that the opportunity windows for learning in the early child is quite high, very high. Whereas when the child grows older and older, goes into teenage and late adulthood, you'll find that the opportunity windows shrinks. That does not mean that you cannot learn in adulthood. You definitely can. Let me give an example of something called as how intelligence or your responses to wiring functions. Take a case of a sugar crystal. If you have to dissolve a sugar crystal in or make it into some kind, take a shape of a glass or something, what do you do for a sugar crystal? One, you can crush it and put it into the glass. Second, you can heat it, it melts down, you can pour it into the glass. And third thing that you can do is you can put it into water, it dissolves, and you can put that water into the glass. These three things can be done with a crystal sugar. Now, interestingly, the first two things require pressure or maybe force and heat, which are actually hard methods. Whereas dissolving is like submerging yourself into something. Same is with your intelligence. When your intelligence crystallizes, it freezes when you are relatively hardwired into when you go into your adulthood. The intelligence crystallizes and the ability goes down for learning. And when you have to learn, you have to either go for a lot of hard work, as we saw with the force and heat applied to the sugar crystals, or you can surrender to someone to get the required knowledge, as sugar crystal dissolved into water to acquire the shape of the glass. But in early childhood, this intelligence is not crystallized, it's fluid. Hence, a lot of things are, in terms of acquired very swiftly in the early childhood. So this neural circuitry plays an important role in developing our habits, our expressions, what we give, our behavior that we depict. It's not only with one individual, it's not only with an individual, it's also between two individuals. So you see, social brain is a phenomena when two people interact with each other, they connect through neuronal junctions. Their neural circuitry has a very strong response to the other person's neural circuitry, and you'll find a social brain connection develops. This is important from the last two aspects of emotional intelligence that we saw, that is empathy and managing relations. Whereas internal circuitry is important from the perspective of self-awareness, self-motivation, and the third thing is self-regulation. If you have understood these three things, I would hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Ruda Savarkar, to take it further for the well-being purpose. And then we'll come into the later part, after we go through the understanding of well-being, how to train your kids into emotional intelligence and well-being. And to the end of it, we'll answer most of your questions, if not all. Thank you.
Is at your home level, at your school and college levels. Now, very important thing to understand. Just now Vishal has explained about social connectivity of brain with empathy. Okay. So let's use this part, this term, to connect with each other. We understand that as we grow, we have some thought processes and we say I know these things. I have learned these things. There is no use of learning. I have seen the world. This is crystallization, or may I say stagnation of learning process. But there is a child within us, and there is a fluidity. There is enthusiasm. Still there is imagination. And these parts of our own personality help us to accept, to know more, and learn with happiness. As you are teachers, you know the secret, how the children love to learn. First, with a playway method, and second, with listening to the stories. So we can connect with each other again with these two methods. Okay, let me share with you the most important thing of child development. One personality, one being, a human being. What do you mean by this being? How this complete personality gets developed? Right from the conception, when the parents or when the husband and wife accepts to become the responsible mother and father, at that time the decision, the conception is made, not at the time, just after conception. The first and foremost is to accept the responsibility. What is the difference between these things? You know, nowadays around 2% of preconceptional counseling persons, they are coming, the couples, and they say we are not yet ready to accept the responsibility as mother and father. Yes, this is the case nowadays. This is the situation, and we have to know, we have to accept and learn, and we can actually overcome these challenges also. Now you are teachers, you are parents. What is the definition of parenting? Parenting defines the role model which actually gives everything, not expecting anything in return for self, so that my next progeny can become the better and best parents, right? So many of our colleagues and friends, they say we don't expect anything from our children, we just say that they should live their life happily, they should be healthy and happy. But this is not the thing. Most importantly, we should know our own being. Every being has got its own personality prospectus. So what is the child? Mostly parents, friends, and teacher. These are the surroundings of one child. May I have a next slide, please, Vishal? Okay. To tell or to teach or to understand the other being, may we know our own being? Okay. We have got gross body. We mostly know our all system like respiratory system, cardiovascular system, nervous system. There are reproductive system, excretory systems, so many systems. But most of the times we understand the unit of our gross body is basic cell. And in other part we say 5 organs of senses like Panchendriyas and Karmendriyas. They are also very important and they are part of our gross body. And now we are dealing with emotional well-being and it is dealt with our subtle body. We know about that, like mind, intellect, and consciousness. There are 5 spheres of existence which are actually included in subtle body. And very importantly, this gross body and this subtle body, they are interconnected. Okay? We have heard about diabetes and hypertension and malignancy, and we know that the etiological factors for that, they are psychosomatic. We accept that stress is the most important causative factor for pathological situations in our gross body. But to understand the connectivity in between gross body and subtle body, we should understand our own emotions. We should know, we should tag our own emotions. We should deal with our negative emotions. We should enhance our positive emotions. This emotional well-being is actually helpful for our vitality and immunity. And how these gross bodies and subtle body are connected? They are connected through our nerves, blood vessels, and lymphatics. Since you are teachers, you know all these things. So I will just explain very simply about lymphatics. Lymphatics are not carrying the oxygenated blood or deoxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood is carried by the arteries and deoxygenated blood by veins. But lymphatics are carrying the essence of food, what we have taken in. They are directly related with our own immunity. These lymphatics are interconnected with lymph nodes. We are talking with each other virtually. We are connected with auditory system and visual system. Now, may I request you to imagine that we are interconnected and we are actually sitting face to face with each other. To understand the lymphatics, can you just touch your ears, slightly pull your ear upwards, downwards, touch your jaw, and feel. You must have known about lymph nodes here when you have got tonsillitis. These lymph nodes, you can sense them because they are tender and enlarged, right? If you have heard about wuju before namaz, we actually do these things to cleanse up, external cleansing. But while doing that, in fact, we are stimulating these lymphatics, the blood flow. Very importantly, to know, to accept, and then to act. This is the link between physical immunity and emotional immunity. May I give you a very small example of that? If your blood sugar level is slightly high, okay, since you are in a profession where even though you are stressed or you are unhappy or some problems are with you, but when you are actually into your class, when you are giving, you keep all these things away or you sometimes suppress these things. You are standing for 45 minutes continuously and you are again teaching, you are giving, unaware of your own body. At that time, what happens? Continuously, your body is coping with all the surrounding situations. And then, if because of these things you land up in physical unease, sometimes you feel irritated after 2 lectures. Why? Very simple. You need more oxygen, you need more sugar. You are actually feeling hungry, but you are not unaware. I'm sorry, you are unaware. So, what do you understand by that? Your physical part actually affected your emotions. Now, vice versa. Understand one thing. You are trying to enjoy the coffee, okay? And suddenly you feel after 2 sips, oh, am I drinking the coffee empty stomach? Maybe my acidity will go up. Or if you are suffering from migraine, you will, oh no, this may stimulate my migraine. Now you are taking each sip of your coffee with thought process of how the disturbances because of caffeine are going to happen. So you are actually taking in all these emotions along with your coffee. So just imagine how much is the possibility? How much is the possibility of having a migrainous part or acidity part? Emotions are actually interlinked. And why it is important to understand? Because being or astitva is defined with physics and emotions, with mind and body, psycho and soma. Vishal has just explained one thing about amygdala, prefrontal cortex, and hippocampus. But there are mirror neurons also. Okay. Now, if I yawn, what is the need of yawning? Maybe my body needs more oxygen. So, with yawning, I'm taking in more oxygen. But if you are watching me and if you are connected, spontaneously you will yawn. Why? Because your mirror neurons mimic what you are doing. So, your social activities, your connectivity with the other human affects your own being. This is the way we are actually empathizing with each other. This is the way we should actually empathize and connect with our children, students, and pupils because they are being. Now, we know most of the times that there are some hurdles, there are some challenges. So, to make them understand, we usually can take care of explaining or teaching them with the help of storytelling. So, I will just share one story about one case. Around 8 years boy, and he was having very troublemaking activity. He was tagged with ADHD, and in all the PTA meetings, the teacher has to explain to the parents, please ask your son to not to have a violence with other children, and he is distracting the whole class. He is not paying attention. He is not listening to us, and most importantly, he just stares for 1 or 2 minutes. Even though I'm talking, he's just not listening to me. Now, what happened? The parents and the teacher both came to us. What was the scenario? The teacher was very cooperative, and she was the class teacher, and she said, I want to understand what is the cause. Since 6 months, I'm trying to understand this problem with this boy, but I'm a failure. But I really want to help that child. What happened that the parents were frustrated, and they have not told the teacher or school that this boy was adopted. Actually, unwanted pregnancy also lead to intrauterine some problems in our central nervous system. And this happened with the same with this boy. When we have done the EEG, the child was suffering from petit mal epilepsy, and that lead to violence and ADHD. And he was unable to learn like other students. So after the medications, the child is now very peaceful. He's okay with his peers, and he's trying to learn. So this was the body which was affecting the boy. Now vice versa. One girl, she had attended menarche, menstrual cycle, very early, and there was excessive blood loss, and she was actually diagnosed as depression. But the thing is, she was watching so many TV series, and it was a pre-pubertal thought process and emotions inside her that was leading to irritation. She was not able to share it with her mother because her mother said, if you bring some of the boys' problems at home, I will just close down your school. So she was actually uh, dealing with anemia, depression, as well as prepubertal hormonal surge. This is the way your gross body, your subtle body, your body and your mind, they are interconnected, and they lead to these problems. Third story I will share with you. It's a bit complicated. Ninth standard guy, and he was actually very introvert. So they came to us because father had heart attack. Father was only 45 years old, and lastly he said, I'm so ashamed because my son is saying he is a gay. Now, after fourth session, what came to our understanding or notice that there was a love-hate relationship between son and father. At the age of say 9 to 10 years, father has spanked the child, and he was a very strict person, father, and he was also dominating, and the child was very much suppressed and introvert, and subconsciously he thought that now I'm getting attracted towards other boys, and which is no, it was not the case. He was imagining that he is a gay. Again, the virtual reality came in because he was watching so many web series. Now understand, nowadays our being is affected not only by parents, teachers and friends, but also with these explosive informations from all these TV, mobile and all this. May I share with you with Vishal?
Yeah.
how you should use the small screen and large screen for in about this.
Yeah. So basically, what you'll find is uh, sharing of while you are going ahead with the screen time, or specifically opening up internet with kids or making them aware of the online training or online, nowadays this has become an quite a good necessity. uh, all of us must have understood that this necessity has led us to use our gadgets at home. What is the most important recommendation here is how to enforce some kind of directives or control over this administration of this online gadget screen time for the kid. One of the important thing that you must note here is you must have a large screen in front of the kid. Try and all time avoid the smaller screens. The larger screen, it could be a laptop, could be a television screen, the screen of that size. Please try and avoid a cell phone with a kid. The reason is very simple. There is not enough control with the content that the student goes through, or maybe the windows that the student browses through. It is easy for you to be a witness while the student is learning or maybe viewing some content on internet or on screens, if the screen is a large screen. So the privacy, the proctoring comes into place here, the physical proctoring, that you are able, the child has a conscious sense of being aware of my screen is being always watched by someone. Wherein on a small screen, it becomes increasingly difficult for you to monitor such kind of thing. So this is one thing. Second is, you must also make sure that the definition and the time of the screen that the student must always undergo every day. Definition in the sense what all things you must go through. And if you talk to the student or the kid in this way, it is easy for you to exercise this control. If you see, it goes with the saying, there's a saying by Nietzsche: the things that we resist, they persist. Same happens with the kids. If you resist something, they will persist. It will persist for a longer time. What you have to do then, you have to use affirmations, you have to use positive sentences and present tense in directing the student to do something that you want is in favor and goodwill of the child. This is important. This is important from various perspectives. As we've discussed about mirror neurons, the best part is giving them something good to imitate, may it be at school or may it be at home. Now, if the students are at home, you must train the parents to make sure that they are giving some good environment to the student to imitate. This imitation is a basic skill for learning for everybody, even us, because we share two things since our childhood that we learn through. One is imitation, and second is observation. So I think this is good. So let's switch on to the well-being part again. Just a minute.
Yes. Okay. So the definition of well-being or well-being health, we know according to the WHO, WHO also have included physical, mental, social. Now, family part is very intimate and social part. And the last thing nowadays they are including is spiritual health also. But what do you mean by well-being? To become happy, to feel satisfied, to be with peaceful with self and surrounding. All these factors are actually lead to well-being, not only physical health, but to understand with if we are enjoying ourselves, if we are enjoying our profession, if we are enjoying our connectivity with others, if we are satisfied whatever we have achieved in our life, and if we are peaceful in whatever about the surrounding situation. These are the markers or milestones of well-being, and they are applicable to all. Sometimes we may understand or say or think or imagine that children don't understand about being with peaceful uh, or they feel satisfaction. They don't know the importance of these things or not. Yes, they do. They sense. So physical health, emotional health, family health, and society health, they are not watertight compartments. They are actually interlinked. How? No, voice is not clear. They are saying.
Okay.
Now is it clear?
Go ahead. Go.
Okay. Now let me share with you a very simple thing. We usually say that my grandfather, he had been suffering from diabetes. Even my mother was suffering from diabetes, and now my blood sugar levels are nowadays, even glycosylated hemoglobin is nowadays slightly on a higher position. Maybe I will suffer from diabetes, and I should take care that my children should not have the problem which I am facing. Am I audible clearly? Okay. So, with the help of genetical understanding or hereditary disorders understanding, we just know about disorders. But do we know that we are actually transmitting as a parent X and Y or XX to our children, right? So, we are transmitting our own thoughts, our own deeds, our own sanskaras through these genetics. We are interconnected with these things. While doing the genetical researches, we understood, we know about mutation. Mutations sometimes give rise to some disorders or syndromes. But sometimes, if we understand expression of genes, it's really important. Say, even though there is a hereditary disorder of higher cholesterol or diabetes or hypertension, but if you take care of your lifestyle, if you are peaceful with yourself, at that time, these genes will not express. Okay? How the connection start? The time of conception also matters a lot about development of a child's personality. Because ovum and sperm, they are nothing but one cell out of our own body. Understand this one connectivity. If you are having some constipation at that time, you may suffer frequently with common cold. Mostly in asthma cases, there is always interrelation between constipation, holding of emotions, and then attack of asthma. Same way, if one system is linked with other system, connected with other system, same way, if you are at dis-ease or unease while going for conception, at that time even your sperm and ovum are carrying the same situations, okay, same constitution. So these are the things which have already happened. Even intrauterine life, we are connected with our child. Mother not only transmits through placenta oxygen and nutrition, but she also transmits all the neurochemicals which she is feeling, which she is undergoing stress or all that. So these are the connection between parent and child. And the third thing I'm sharing with you is kosha or aura. Most of the times we feel intuitively that I'm not comfortable with this person, or sometimes you feel, oh, this person is so good, I can very well empathize with that person. And this sensitivity is very high with children. So as a teacher or caretaker, when you are dealing with a child, they can sense your thoughts, your intentions, and your emotions very well. we actually can connect and make them understand about good touch, bad touch, good wordings and bad wordings. So these are the different ways how we are connected. Now, as we have come to the next slide, how to overcome behavioral challenges. Can we just go through the different behavioral challenges which we are facing nowadays? Around 60% of the challenges which the teachers and parents they are complaining, that is one thing. My children, my students, they don't understand how to respect, how to give respect, how to show respect. They are sometimes disconnected, or they are not interested, or they are just blunt. Now, what is the cause of this? What is the etiology of this? Understand? Around 50 years back, we were having 2 to 3 siblings with us, right? We were sharing space, love from our parents, attention from our parents. We were sharing our books, we were sharing our clothes, sometimes even food. So it was adaptation that we need to respect them so that they will pay attention to us. But what is the case nowadays? Nowadays, mostly a single child or two. So the children nowadays, they are getting a big personal space and they are used to it. I don't know, but just think about it. Since how many generations? They don't have to give something. They don't have to share so many things. They are not used to sacrifice. Rather than finding a fault or blaming each other, if we understand the surrounding, the causative factor, it is easy to accept and it is easy to deal with. Second thing, usually the parents and teachers says that we don't expect anything from them. We just are here to give love and care to them, but sometimes they say we don't need that. At one point in my counseling session, very frustrated, he said, "Oh, this is not my fault that I should take care of my parents. It was an accident that I am born." That was a learning for me. It was a bit shock, but it was a learning from me. I was trying to understand why he is expressing in such a way. Yes, again, there are multifactorial things. The child was frustrated and very blunt and very expressive because giving love and giving pampering. The most important thing was the father and mother were unable to give the quantity time to the child. So out of guilt, they have pampered the kid. And what is the reason? Unnecessary, unwanted things are there. The child was not used to sacrifice or to accept or to get adopted. And second most important thing, again, the virtual problems. His friend circle and his peers, they are used to these kind of languages. Nowadays, we have to accept and understand. Usually, what they say don't mean that. Sometimes they use the harsh words. They use very apparently bad words, but they don't mean that. For them, they are easy. First and foremost, again, we have to think about our own definition that we as a teacher, we as a parent are here to give love, care, and respect, and then forgive. But most importantly, there should be a positive communication, there should be discipline, and yes, there should be samskaras. We should set the goals for them. Short-term goals, usually we say that grades in the school, and long-term goals, yeah, he should be happy in his family life, and she should be happy in her career. No, these are not short-term and long-term goals. The short-term and long-term goals are applicable to teachers, to parents as well, to become a good person. to give, to sacrifice, to actually act on ethics and values. These are the important short-term and long-term goals. I think we can have interactions.
Yeah. So interestingly, if you understand how to impart this kind of training of well-being in or emotional intelligence to kids, we would highlight on certain very important techniques, and most of you would be getting the answers to your questions. And I would also request all of you to post your questions in the question answer session. The reason is we lost some of your questions due to the error in the connectivity. I would encourage those who have already posted their questions, repost them on the question answer tab. So before we understand the imparting this EI training into children, and this is very useful for you in the classroom, whether given the scenario you are into a physical classroom or a virtual classroom. And then you may also want to interact with the parents of the kids for imparting this kind of understanding to the parents, so that a complete circle, a three-dimensional understanding can be given to for the development of the kid. So I would encourage everybody to focus on creating an environment. See, one important thing that the child does is they learn through observation and imitation. And however old they get, the imitation part or the observation part is always there with the person. The imitation is quite strong when they are in the early school, or maybe until their teenage. They imitate everything. They imitate their parents, they imitate their teachers, they imitate the the fashion, the public around them, and everybody. And this has been a part of their development. So while we are in the business of training our kids, I don't say you are a part of their development process. You are an integral part of their development process. There is a kind of responsibility that parents share until the kids get into the legal major term. And that is vicarious responsibility. Most of the choices that parents make with their kids is about their dresses, their eating habits, their sleep habits, their classes, their school. Everybody, parents decide until and unless the child has got a good judgment developed. So as this responsibility is shouldered with parents, similarly, school teachers come up with some of the important responsibilities of creating environment. This environment that you must create is also relating to the aspect of inputs that you have to put in the child's development, and that is positive reinforcement. So he or she gets a very strong environment to imitate and observe for. I would encourage to do this with two things. One, your actions. If you do what you speak, kids imitate that. And it's very simple and basic. You have to do what you say. If the parent or a teacher does not do what the student, they're talking to the student, students are likely to follow the suit with the same thing. They will not do what they are saying. So you must say and do exactly the same thing. Second, you must talk to the kids in present tense and in affirmation. This is one of the best techniques that you can impart, in the classroom, and to train them with the parents as well. When you talk to the kids in the present tense, for most of the times, like when you're instructing them, like when you're putting some kind of, some kind of rules to them, it is easy for them to conceptualize it and adopt to it. And also use affirmations. While using affirmations, your tone has to be modulated, in a very systematic way. You don't have to raise your voice or deepen your voice. The tone that you start to speak with, keep the consistent tone until and unless the information is transmitted to the student. These two important techniques, apparently very simple, may have and can have a humongous impact on the learning of the child. Second thing that is important is cultivation of empathy and connection. As I said, empathy, everybody feels and understands what the other person feels and thinks. What is missing here is empathetic connect. If we understand what the other person feels and thinks, the important thing that we must establish is a connection. And this connection only and only comes when we have right intentions. For example, with the child, if you see the child is suffering, or maybe child is not able to do things, or the child is not able to cope with the stresses of the examinations or maybe the workload, what you have to do is not only understand that he's going through some trouble, but also connect. And your connection will always come through your actions and your words. So try to come up with a connection. I have got some questions. I'm going to answer all of the questions, but let us get along with these techniques first, and I'm going to come to the answers again, the questions again. So connection, empathetic connection, and one of the good ways of doing it is when you're with the kid. The touch is one of the best ways to do it. Touch. And I believe this is not to be confused with good touch or bad touch, but kind of empathetic connect. What happens with touch is your body secretes some kind of oxytocins, a hormone which is care hormone, which is secreted when a mother touches the infant, or maybe the kid of the mother. What happens with this is a natural instinct of care is, emotion of care is developed. Second thing that you have to do is when you have a pure intention, by looking to the child with a kind of intent of purity and maybe compassion, your body starts secreting, which we call as love neurotransmitter, and that is dopamine. The fountains of dopamine springs up into your system and the child's, system, which is altogether a neurotransmitter of love. And mind you, the most important trigger for this is just a look of compassion and and love towards the child. And this is recognized. There is no language for this. The language of connection is already established. We've understood the social brain connectivity theory earlier. So mind you, it works wonderfully, and it is proved in laboratories for numerous ways.
And it is beneficial to both.
And it is beneficial to both. So that is one important thing. That is empathetic connect. Then train your child to create an awareness, of gap between stimulus and response. There are various triggers that come into the last 3 points come into the same realm: the triggers and the cognitive control. You must have known this experiment of marshmallows, where the students of 4-year-old kids were given marshmallow dishes to eat for, and they were asked to wait for some time until the experimenter goes away and comes back. And they were said that those students or those kids who wait to eat the marshmallows will be given one more dish of marshmallows. This was a phenomenal experiment done with the 4-year-old kids. When the experimenter went away, the teacher went away, the children served with marshmallows. Some of them ate away right away. Some of them waited until the teacher or the experimenter came back. And some of them were halfway through. They were like halfway eaten, halfway not. This, when the teacher came back, he offered all those who were waiting for him to come back a dish of marshmallows, a second dish of marshmallows. This experiment did not stop here. They were tracked for maybe almost a decade long, maybe 13, 14 years when they reached the high school. And surprisingly enough, the ones who stayed back to eat marshmallows were doing exceptionally better in their grades and performances in their high schools, while the others were not. This exemplifies the importance of patience or delayed gratification in your life. We always have to nurture the core values of patience, compassion, love. And here is where the prospect of this understanding comes from. That you have to delay make them aware between the gap between stimulus and response, wherein they come up with a response and not a kind of reaction. How to do this? If this is a question, and I would encourage you to do, all of you, and also share with your kids a practice of controlled breathing. Believe me, folks, your prefrontal cortex have got two allies to come up with a response which is more thoughtful. One of the ally is oxygen. Your oxygen is one of the fundamental, things that work in favor of your prefrontal cortex, which is, again, I say, a sophisticated, area of your brain which is involved in decision making. And then you have something called as labeling of emotions, training the kids in understanding what emotion they are feeling. If you know, this is the key of self-awareness. So what do you do now? What do you do? So have a controlled breathing exercise. Teach them this with the kids, whether you start an online session with the kids on maybe whatever online apparatus you're using, or maybe in a classroom while you begin with the session. It's like going into a mental gym. 2 minutes of breathing exercise will strengthen their mental muscle. It's like going to a gym, doing some repetitions of your arms to strengthen your biceps. Do that. How to do that? The best way of doing it is like, the conventional pranayama technique that has been postulated in, the Oriental countries is one of the good ways of doing it. And there can be much more like the mindfulness exercises that has been, developed in the Western world, basis of which has been always been the Oriental studies. But controlled breathing exercises are good. I would want to share you a small video of it, maybe with everybody, when I share a copy of this presentation. Maybe some of them have asked a video of it to everybody to understand the controlled breathing exercise. And then this cognitive control will set up with the kids. It is important for you to set up the cognitive control, because the teenagers is the time where the impulse control mechanism is developed. The impulsivity which the teenager does things gradually dwindles down, and a kind of maturity sets in. In layman's term, we call it as maturity. Essentially, this is what we should all know is, you're able to control your impulses. So these are some of the techniques. I would want to answer most of your queries now. So yes, there are 17 questions that have come up. I am going to ensure that me and Dr. Ruta, both of us, are audible so that we can answer simultaneously some of your questions. So Dr. Ruta, is Dr. Ruta visible?
Am I audible and visible?
Yes.
Okay.
So fantastic. If Dr. Ruta is audible and visible, so let us start with just audible, not visible. Okay, let me.
So again, I am repeating same thing what Vishal has said. To stabilize and to maintain our own emotional well-being, which is applicable for grown-ups and children, breathe in and breathe out, or abdominal breathing is helpful. Second most important thing is to tag your emotion. Even though you are a teacher, even though you are a parent, you should know your own emotions, as well as you should try and encourage your children to make the expression what they are feeling. Are they feeling angry or disappointed or hurt, or they are having some phobias or anxiety? Train them and then actually encourage them to express the name or tagline of their emotion. There are positive and negative both emotions. Emotion is an energy. It is neutral. Okay, it may come into form of positivity or negativity, but definitely for well-being, the positive emotions are most important.
Okay.
Okay.
If both of us are audible and visible, now only audio, no audio.
No.
Not
No,
visible.
it's okay.
Oh, it's okay if she is not
Because
visible.
we are on.
Okay. Okay, let me check. Great. Let us go to the questions. I believe that should work.
Okay. Till then, We'll do one very simple exercise because we are with each other since so many minutes. Okay, this is known as intellectual anchoring. Do some mudras. Give a pressure on your thumb by your index finger, both, and then put it on your lap. Take a breathing, inhalation, hold, and exhale. Okay, and just say, we are thankful to each other. Gratitude is the most powerful emotion that triggers your central nervous system and peripheral nervous system both ways. And
Okay.
even your parasympathetic.
So let's go to the question answers now.
Right.
How to develop cognitive control in KG level? So KG level kids are below the age of 6 or 7, and hence these kids are in a state where you must focus on their development of their emotions rather than cognition. The most important thing that remains with the kid all through the life from these years is their development of their values and emotions altogether. If you see, cognition is one such thing that should start its development, near the formal development, I would say, the school related development, like the reading and the writing skills. If you start after 7 years, there is no problem with that. The best part that you must focus here is on what they feel, what they take in inputs as a part of their values, morals, and emotions, and those define, because I'll tell you, cognition can definitely go up. While in the training, it needs practice, it needs wiring, which can be done from 7th year until the 18th year of the kid.
And there is one condition also, that sometimes they are unable to express. They have learned the thing, they know the thing, but maybe the expressions comes later. So grades and these things doesn't matter really. Most importantly, to form a base of child's personality.
That is important. By Vilena, and that is how to develop positive thinking in a teenage boy. Very good question. Let's understand what is thinking at the forefront. Thinking or thought is a vector quantity. It's not a scalar quantity. It has got magnitude, intensity, and a direction, that is positive or negative. So while you're talking about positive thinking, it's about disposition of a boy towards typical, thinking process. When we discussed about the neural pathways or neural circuitry, as I said, a positive thinking circuitry is necessary for a boy to exhibit positive thinking. If you always go on saying, negative sentences or negative environment is created around the student, you will find that his neural circuitry that is developed is always looking towards the bad part of the things, the negative part of the things. What you can do is, for a consistent period of 2 to 3 weeks, at least 3 weeks, you must be able to reinforce positive environment and positive things around the child, which will have a greater impact on his thinking process. A new neural circuitry will be formed, and which is relatively permanent. If you understand the definition of learning, learning is a relatively permanent phenomena. Things that remain with us for a relatively permanent time. It is not an absolute permanent thing. So that is how you can do it. The next question, you want to comment?
No.
The next question that has been asked is by Sonali, and it's how to make feel happy and stable to students in Corona disaster situation. Good question. And as I said, we are living in a difficult times as of now, and we do not know where the world will go year from now. How to feel happy? Happiness is a state of feeling right now. Beware of one thing, that anything of it's like you must be like a bird described in the words of Tagore. It is the bird which sings when the dawn is still dark. It is with hopefulness, it is with optimism that happiness can settle in. So how to do that? How you can come into it? First thing is develop a sense of gratitude. Gratitude begets satisfaction. A perpetual sense of complaining about the things around you will set you into state of mental scarcity. Do not land into it. If you have to train your student into some kind of happiness, first thing that you must take help of is being grateful about things, grateful about small things around them, about their friends, about their parents, about their day that they are able to see every other day they wake up from the uh, bed, the teachers they are able to interact with, the school, the quality of education that they are getting. And it is not only with the prosperous students, it's also about whoever in this uh, people around us. We must be able to find some sense of gratefulness about our life. You must always know that we are blessed with things which we are unaware of. A small awareness of these things will make us feel more grateful about these things, and this will settle in a kind of satisfaction which begets happiness actually.
This should be done by the parents or the grown-ups so that it will be absolutely transmitted easily to children, and we should allow them to play with their peers, because I have seen one family where the father is so anxious and scared that he is not allowing his two kids to play with other kids in society. Yes, definitely you should take care of the hygiene and physical distancing, not social distancing. But if you are absolutely sure that they are not showing any symptoms, you know the logical part of how the corona infection presents itself. And since 1 month everyone is okay and you are not allowing the kid to play, how the child will be happy?
So the next question is how to deal with overconfident child. So confidence is one such thing that has to be nurtured. Being overconfident with kids, actually it's a very tricky situation here. You must be able to channelize their confidence. If they are able to know things and if they're able to grasp things better, it's a likely possibility that the child will land up into some kind of boisterous thing. He will be boosting his own thing, his capacities and capabilities beyond his actual things. So to do that, I would encourage all of the students, or maybe sorry, the teachers, to real estimate their kids. Underestimate is not advisable. Overestimation is also not advisable. Getting into real estimates of what they are, making them realize about that thing, and this is cognitive correction. The thinking, the belief has to be corrected. That can happen with a simple method of reinforcing what they are, what they actually are, the right estimates. I would encourage all of you. This will need some kind of interventions in terms of counseling. But yes, you can definitely have positive affirmations and real estimating the child's capabilities all in when you meet the child, so that there is what you can say a kind of a part of cognitive behavior therapy that is happening with the child unknowingly.
So overconfidence is sometimes a mask. I have seen around 10% of the overconfident children, they are just showing they are confident or overconfident, but under that mask, they are vulnerable. So one has to understand the true etiology or the basic things like what is the ability, what is the emotional intelligence, and what is the interest about the scholastic part as well as the emotional part of that child.
So go to the next question, which is asked by Manoj Kumar. Is love, care, respect, etc. is always help to change behavior? Because kids means 30 brain, 30 kids means 30 brain and mind. Can you explain any behavior modification method? Okay. Mr. Manoj, be assured that anything but love, care, and respect changes the behavior of the child. You have to trust this to the core of your delivery methods. I can say discipline is one of the most driving factor, and when you have a kids of teenage coming to you, but love, care, and respect are fundamental cornerstones of changing behavior. The empathy that this brings through, if you say 30 brains and 30 mind coming together, just understand, you can turn this in 30 brains and 30 minds into a single consciousness, single mind and brain. If you are able to connect, as I said, social behavior is confabulation of all your individual consciousness coming together to a collective consciousness. It's like we are live, everybody on this platform, 100 plus people through a cloud, facility, and we are able to relate to each other right now. So individual minds coming to a cloud and able to disseminate the kind of expression that they are into. Believe me, if you are asking me some kind of behavior modification method, beware respect. If you address the child with respect, the reciprocation will be of respect. If you address the child with love, the reciprocation will be love. You may not expect that coming to you from the child in the first or second go, but that will season in and that will come along gradually, and that is the objective of learning. You don't have to have a seemingly very shallow and rapid change coming to, but you must have a change that is durable and most encouraging. So use the expression of love, care, and respect, and I believe this is one of the best things. For detailed behavior modification process, I can say that systematic desensitization is one of the methods. If you have maladaptive behavior that is coming into from the child to turn into adaptive behavior, this can be discussed in a more appropriate session coming to you if you're interested by. We go to the next question by Tamila Rasi. Hyper children, however you are giving space to them, ultimately they bully others. How do you overcome? I would believe, yeah, you want to answer this?
Actually, first and foremost, if possible, don't try to label them or tag them. Okay, hyperactivity is related probably to the intrauterine part factor, or even the child who is not breastfed also lead to hyperactivity. And third thing, a very curious child, fully enthusiastic and having a vitality, strong vitality, may appear hyperactive because his energy is not exhausted. So he's curious, he's playful, he's happy, and he's hyperactive. And he is not intentively doing problem to others. So first and foremost, first take off the tag, then understand the etiology, and third, make the child aware that you need the other colleagues to be with you as your friend. So you have to actually connect with them, empathize with them, so the child understands. Most of the times, the tagged ADHD children, they listen to you. They don't show that they are listening to you, but they are actually listening. Have a trust, have a belief in yourself, and say it firmly. Definitely, the child will listen to you, and say minimum 7 days continuously if you are talking to the child in affirmative, positive ways, in a present tense. Most of the times, 8th day or next day, the child will actually listen to you.
Okay, we can take a couple of more questions, 2 or 3 more questions. I believe we are almost 1.5 hours from the session. We'll have 10-15 minutes more, and I'll be answering all of the questions for all of the participants in personally through their email. But to start, to answer some of the questions from for Amit Kumar, how can we have some structured approach and successful best practices and techniques on each stages of child growth, be it from young child to teens? As you said, an example of about big and small screens, how to earn respect in modern current times. Great question, Sanil. Let me tell you one thing. Each stage of the child is unique with their unique pros and cons. I would say that early childhood of a kid has to be, always and always until the age of 7 years, you have to have an unconditional approach of love towards a kid. Unconditional love, I say. You don't have to worry about the discipline. You don't have to worry about, just worry about the values, emotions, and morals that the child is building. After the 7th year of the child until the 18th year of the child, you must start with the disciplinary practices, which are also with the cognitive inputs for the child, like learning and writing like reading and writing as a cognitive skills. In the current time, what students miss out, apparently complaints come by parents and teachers that don't respect. See, the definition of respect of the students in Generation Z has changed dramatically. You must have also understand that you come from either Generation X or Generation Y. For a kid to be able to relate to Generation Z, which we are still unaware what are the characteristics of this generation, Generation Z. Generation Z is more of an outspoken, impatient, impactful generation, and the definition of their words have dramatically different meanings than what we have with our upbringing. So whether their expression of respect will also vary. But if you understand, the respect will only come to you when, I said earlier also, when you walk the talk. When you walk the talk, there is an immense amount of respect this Generation Z garners for everybody. Yeah.
Actually, I will just share one example. 16-year boy, he said, I respect my parents. I don't smoke in front of them. This is the way I respect them. Now, this is the definition according to that boy. And if the father is already smoking, then he is saying that I'm allowed to. But out of respect, I'm not smoking in front of him. The second example, that the girl is saying that my parents are really orthodox. They just value these all cultural part and all that. So, I have decided I will not be in live-in relationship. This is the way I am respecting them, but they don't understand that I am respecting them. My father and mother scolded me that how can you think of saying this? Now, see, we have to understand what they are watching, what they are listening, what they are imagining, and what they are expressing. After that, we can actually channelize their thoughts, their emotions towards the well-being.
Great. So there's a next question by Smita, which says, how can I control an aggressive behavior of ADHD child in a normal classroom? Smita, you must understand one thing very clearly, that the child suffering from attention deficit hyperactive disorder is basically not able to cope up with his attention skills. First thing, he is also demanding attention himself, and he is also not able to cope up with the kind of expression of attention that is coming through him. So the best part I would encourage in this small session as of now is, you must have a very concrete and empathetic dialogue with the child.
Can we explain our 5 types?
Yeah. So one of the best ways of doing it is, if a child is actually in the classroom making some kind of disturbances or nuisances, what you have to do is, there are 5 points on your face. These are the points which we call them as 5 taps, and these are the basis in traditional Chinese medicine. They are the points where your sinuses rest, and they actually settle down your excessive energies, regulate them, and channelize them. The first point is on your forehead, between your eyebrows. You have to tap it this way with 2 fingers. In the child, you can do it this way. The second is side of your eyes. The third is below your eyes. The fourth is below your nose, and the fifth is on your chin. While you tap these 5 points continuously for at least 30 seconds, sequentially or otherwise, there is no need to follow the sequence, but maybe in a circular manner, you'll find that the calmness will settle in with the child.
Yeah,
along with this, you can say some kind of running commentary to the child, like the, XYZ, the name of the child, say, Amar, you are feeling better, you are able to stay calm, you are able to focus in the classroom. Now, all these things are affirmative and in present tense.
Actually.
So this is the way you will be able to do that.
The medications may also help.
Yeah. The next question is by Johns. I don't know, like, what's the best way to adjust with the hyper students, and what advice should we give up to the parents if they have any case like this? I said a couple of things with the hyperactive students, but for the parents, I would say that while you're talking to the parent of the kids, do not hide things. First thing, be open. Second, while you're open to the parents, do not tag the kid with some kind of anomaly or disease or maybe things relating to. You'll always be able to point their behavior, but do not, we discourage tagging kids with like terms like ADHD or autism or Asperger's syndrome or dyslexia. These terms can be used for clinical purposes with the clinician or with the counselor, but not with the parents. It carries a lot of burden, emotional burden for the parent. I can tell you, without the usage of these terms as well, you will be able to treat the kids with more, proper care and with involvement of parents.
Simple 3 basic fundas. First, food. Second, sleep. And third, their physical energy should be channelized. So for food, please try to understand they shouldn't eat fatty foods in the morning for breakfast, because either they will feel charged or they will feel sleepy. Second thing, sleep. Deep sleep is very important for normal person also and for hyperactive child also. So good sleep actually calms them down. So sleep should be actually encouraged. And third thing, you can give them some trainings like swimming or playing or running till they have their breath in exhausted ways. So you can channelize the energy. So these 3 things can be applied.
So there's a list of questions that are there, almost 30 plus questions, and I believe we need to answer each of everybody's question. The thing is, there are 11 unanswered questions as of now. How to develop their cognitive? I have already answered this.
Are you okay with this? I mean, we are with each other, I think, since last 1 hour?
Yes, almost 1.5 hours.
Okay.
So I believe I will be able to respond to everybody's questions personally on your email. I'll be ensuring that this comes to you along with a lot of learning material as well. So as of now, we are running short of time.
It was a takeaway for you. So my request is, first and foremost, when you are actually thinking about well-being of children or well-being of others, please take care of your own well-being also. Understand your physical ability, understand your emotional ability, your physical and emotional immunity, and yes, very importantly, take care of yourself.
So thank you everybody. At the last outset, I would be able to give you some information about what we do, and maybe if you're interested, we'll be also sharing some things with you on email. So we are enthusiastic team of professionals from psychology, medicine, technology, which deals with understanding of kids and maybe psychology and mental health for adults as well. And we deal with the modern day challenges of mental health, and we do a lot of psychometric assessments. We run programs for kids, and we run programs for corporate individuals, teachers, teacher training, and all those things. If you're interested, you may visit our site www.brainwork.in for more information. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for this wonderful evening and this wonderful audience tonight. Thank you very much.